So according to you, what do you mean by product design? Somebody has written expression of usability, solving problem by designing experiences, okay, process of ideating, developing, refining products that meet specific market needs and solve user problem, engaging UI. So, okay, engaging UI. Okay, Shweta Das is saying then Priya Varshini's process of creating products, etc. ABCD, whatever. ठीक है. Everybody is fine. ठीक है. The product design is the whole UX related to the product itself. Okay. So सबसे पहले तो हम ये decide करते हैं कि first principle thinking क्या होती है. What is first principle thinking? Then we'll talk about what is product thinking, and then we'll talk about what is design thinking. ठीक है. सबसे पहले first principle thinking is the concept of figuring out the core assumptions in a particular product which don't change. Like, I'll give you an example. Think of, I have given this example multiple times. Whenever you get a great experience, like you are ordering something from Swiggy, right? It is like a first principle behavior that you say that if I give food at an optimal cost and simultaneously it comes in the right time and it's the right quality and everything, and if you give a very good food selling experience, people will not go to the preceding experience, which is actually going to the restaurant, standing there in a queue, right? And do all of those things, right? So you would essentially move to a new experience, which is, so what are those variables? I'll write those across. So old food booking experience. ठीक है, तो इसको हम यहाँ पे लिखते हैं और यहाँ पे लिखते हैं रेस्टोरेंट और यहाँ पे लिखते हैं स्विगी. ठीक है. नाउ टाइम टेकन टू order something. Okay? Because it's a restaurant, it doesn't have that many options, that many structures across it. You might find it, you might now not find it. On an average, it will take to 1 to 2 hours to effectively find the place where you actually get the food you want. क्योंकि अब अगर मानो स्विगी जैसी कोई चीज एग्जिस्ट नहीं करती थी, if let's assume there wasn't anything that Swiggy, you would have essentially to look down the internet, looked at the listings of multiple restaurants, picked up, called them that do you have biryani, do you have this, do you have do not, right? And it would have taken you 1 to 2 hours. In Swiggy, it takes you 10 minutes. And then price, right? General price, the cost that you incur is that you have to go to the restaurant. Okay? You have to stand in a queue. Okay? And you have to pay the price which the restaurant owner decides. Okay? It has no competition. Okay? Swiggy, standardized prices. This is the second thing. Price में भी आपको standardized मिलते हैं. Third, time taken. It will take you probably 1 to 2 hours to go to the restaurant, pick up the food, bring it back. Swiggy, it will take you 45 minutes max. कभी-कभी ज़्यादा हो जाता है, but on an average 45 minutes. So practically, you spend 4 to 5 hours on getting the food you wanted, probably at a higher cost than market. On the contrary, Swiggy mein the same thing happened in 55 minutes at a great cost and simultaneously competitive discovery. Correct? On the very same thing that we just did right now, would you ever go back to the restaurant experience? Because the Swiggy experience is so better, right? You would never go back. What is this first principle here that you are getting, right? The first principle is that anything that adds value to your life in an affordable structure, right? You would not want to leave that experience, right? That is why we say that anything that adds value adds happiness to your life, and anything that adds happiness to your life, you want to repeat that experience, right? So if A is equal to B is equal to C, then anything that adds value to your life you want to repeat that experience. That's why we say in product management that great product experience have high retention. Ab baat chamki. Pretty much. But from a market, so Cosmic Karma is saying if we enjoy the restaurant work very much, that's an alternate problem statement, right? I am not saying that restaurants will be dissolved, but that's an experience that you want to inculcate. 99% of the time when you order food, it may not be the, or 95% of the time, the experience is that you want to get your food, right? 5% times you want to visit a restaurant with your spouse, you want to do things, bunch of things over there. You have to design the experience completely differently in that case. That's why there were different startups like Food Panda, Groupon, etc., ABCD, Zomato, whatever they did, right? But the thesis of the first principle there was different, right? So if effectively anything that adds value to your life, you essentially want to repeat that experience, do it consistently again and again, again and again. That's why you don't go to a vendor, flight booking vendor now. You go to Make My Trip because that experience is simpler, right? You don't essentially call a taxi service, you book Uber. That's a simpler experience, right? And that's why we say any great experience, right, should have higher retention. Yahan tak sab log mere sath clear hai? This is what you call as first principle thinking. What is the underlying principle or intrinsic motivation of the customer to repeat that experience? Now, second question, what is product thinking? तो फर्स्ट प्रिंसिपल थिंकिंग हमने डिसाइड कर लिया, इट इज finding the hypothesis which essentially adds value to people's life, and we say it is going to stay true for a consistent amount of time, a significant amount of time. That's your first principle, right? What is product thinking? Problem solving methodology for developing valuable solution for user problems. ठीक है? Stepping into, Cosmic Karma says, stepping into the shoes of a potential user, identifying problems using first principles and solving them. To a certain level, you are absolutely right, dude. Right? Thinking for product, whatever, thinking of creating a product that solves any issue or makes your life easy. Okay, so product thinking is essentially when you start thinking from a product layer perspective. What I mean by that is that now you have identified a first principle which kind of resides in the problem space, which you essentially say, okay, so this is the problem, and based on this problem, I want to build a hypothesis. Product thinking essentially means how do you translate that into some kind of a product layer, which essentially kind of solves the problem at some level at scale, right? What I mean by that is that essentially if you're trying to solve a macro problem, you have identified a first principle that this has to exist. How do I essentially come up with a solution or the fundamental thesis of that solution through which I can build some level of technology layer on top of it, which can solve the problem at scale? That is what you call as product thinking. Product thinking is coming up of solutions which can be used at scale to solve a potential problem which we have identified through first principle. So Cosmic Karma is actually right in a certain level. Yes, that it essentially, but the important part about product thinking is that we always start thinking from this perspective that how will this solution translate at scale, right? यहां तक बात समझ में आ गई तो तुम्हें पता चल गया प्रोडक्ट थिंकिंग लेयर पे यू इफेक्टिवली कम अप विद अ सॉल्यूशन, राइट? दैट दिस इज what kind of solution should exist, right? And if this solution exists, the problem would be solved. First principle thinking is identifying of that hypothesis. Second, how does your product layer or your technology layer essentially solve that problem at scale is the attitude of a great product thinker. यहां तक बात सबके साथ क्लियर है, अलाइंड है सब मेरे साथ? ठीक है. अब सेकंड स्टेप के बाद व्हाट इज डिजाइन थिंकिंग? व्हाट इज डिजाइन थिंकिंग? ये जो ज्ञान वाले वर्ड्स होते हैं ना, मेरे को बड़े अच्छे लगते हैं सुनने में. फर्स्ट प्रिंसिपल हो गया प्रोडक्ट थिंकिंग, डिजाइन थिंकिंग क्या हो गया? व्हाट इज डिजाइन थिंकिंग? तो हमने सबसे पहले बोला व्हाट इज फर्स्ट प्रिंसिपल थिंकिंग. ठीक है, इट रिजाइड्स इन द प्रॉब्लम स्पेस. ठीक है, इट इज अबाउट आइडेंटिफाइंग a core value prop which stays true over a significant population and span of time. ये क्लियर है? Second is, what is product thinking? It stays in the solution space. Identifying product layer ideas which essentially solve the problem or the hypothesis at scale. Make sense? ठीक है, उसके बाद आता है डिजाइन थिंकिंग. अब मैं आपसे ना एक इंटरेस्टिंग सवाल पूछना चाहता हूं. ठीक है, सो अज्यूम, ठीक है, सो जस्ट टेक एन अजम्पशन. ठीक है, you went to makemytrip.com and what happened was that you wanted to book a ticket. Now the flight booking UI, which is like from to wherever you see that, it's on some random page somewhere where the discovery is very poor, right? The page is not easy, even though the same service actually solves the problem for. So assume there are two websites, one is Vistara, one is Make My Trip. Okay, in Make My Trip, the finding, the search or the discovery of basically putting the values of from to how many people, where you want to travel, is on some random page. On Vistara, it's on the front page, the home page. In spite of the same product adding the same value to your life, that it is helping you book tickets, right? Can you tell me which website will you use? Will you use Vistara? Will you use Make My Trip? Yes. So design thinking is the layer after product thinking, which essentially means that I have figured out a value. Now, how do I make it so simple for people to consume it in the first 30 seconds? Correct? That is what is, that's why you see across the world, take any travel website, they have fundamentally the same UX. Correct. Ankit is right. It's the ease and simplicity of using the product. So design thinking is the layer. How do you essentially provide value to the end customer of your product in the least possible effort? Again, I'll repeat. Design thinking is the thinking process in which you essentially give the value of the application to the end user in the smallest possible effort. बात समझ में आई? Is it clear? Everybody aligned with me? What I mean by that is, for example, take an idea of an iPhone. iPhone है क्या? It's a supercomputer. You can do practically anything on it, right? But in order to set that phone up, right, it takes you practically 10 minutes. You effectively have a supercomputer in your, right? Supercomputer in your pocket. But on the contrary, you are essentially very easily able to essentially use the product because of the design thinking layer. They have figured out that what is the easiest possible onboarding flow through which you can cover 60-70% of whatever applications the iPhone does in 10 minutes. So design thinking is the layer where the value of the product layer is given to the end user in the least possible effort or time. Now, from here originate what you call as product design questions. So now you understand that the product design questions reside at the design layer, which essentially means you figured out a solution. What is the most beneficial UI, UX, information design, interaction design, so that the value of the end product is delivered in the fastest possible way, right? Let me give you another example, right? So let's look at Uber as an example. Okay? So design thinking in general has 4 core pillars. So the 4 layers of product design are: number 1, conceptual design; number 2, information design; number 3, interaction design; number 4, visual design. Right? Absolutely. These are the four pillars of conceptual design, information architecture or information design, whatever you want to call it, interaction design, and visual design. Now, as product managers, what mistake do we do? We spend a lot of time on visual design. Don't we do that? UI बढ़िया है तो यार product भी अच्छा ही होगा. ऐसा ही बोलते हैं ना हम. ऐसा ही बोलते हैं ना. Where do according to you as product managers, aspiring people, where do you think most people spend most of their time? Nitya is absolutely right. Sundar banane mein. That's correct. So unfortunately, the way people build products is people spend 50% here, maybe 30% here, maybe 10% here. यहाँ तो सोचते ही नहीं है 5% होगा probably, right? On the contrary, great product managers do 60% here, 20% here, 10% here, and probably 10% here. This is great product. This is okay product. Maybe works, maybe doesn't. Now, what do you mean by these things? Okay, so let me ask you a question. What is conceptual design? This is the iceberg image where the tip of the iceberg, 3-4 layers are present. Correct. Have any of you asked yourself this question, that why does Uber have a map like interface? Why can't it be a listing structure? Why can't it be some other kind of interface? Why do every cab application in the world have a map like interface? हाँ, मानिक ने सही बात लिखी है. मैप दिखता है तो लोगों को फील आता है ट्रैवल का कि मैं एक जगह से दूसरी. So whenever you think of travel, the thought that people have in their head is I want to go from A location to B location. And what is the most logical construct which will get built in your head when you want to visualize that? That is a map. That's the most logical way to. That is why you consistently start thinking towards conceptual design, right? Ki what is the image people will think about when we are essentially building this product for them? We don't have to build something which is completely flipped, right? And if you do a poor job in conceptual design, कितना ही अच्छा information design बना लो, however good the interaction design, however good the visual design, nobody is going to use it because they cannot relate to the product. So I'll give you another example. How many of you have heard about this product called Superhuman? So Superhuman is an email client. It's a billion-dollar company, right? And their conceptual design was, their thought was that email in general is not something strategic in people's life. Email for most people is like a task. If you get an email where your manager asks you something about something, you effectively answer that across. And if you want to discuss something, you effectively book a meeting. That's exactly what you do. 96% of the cases, right? 4% there might be strategic discussions on email also, but 95% cases, email is more like a task. You might need some data, you might to give some feedback, you might to want to add somebody else in the thread. So it's majorly a task, right? So they thought how people do tasks effectively. People do tasks. I'm talking about task and tactical चीजें and strategic चीजें दो अलग चीजें होती हैं. Tactical things essentially mean which is a task. You have to do that. If you have to essentially prepare for an exam, you have to do these 100 questions. Like writing a PRD is a task, but it has some strategic element also. But practically anything that you essentially can break down at a cellular level is a task. Email, 90% of the scenarios, it's a task that you have to give information, you have to receive information, you have to probably add people, right? Now, do you know what they did? They said, let us build, if the conceptual design is that people think of emails as a task, why don't we build the product like that? So when you use Superhuman, it only shows you next. What's the next task? What essentially happens because of that is that people end up cleaning their entire email structure into us, because they are not seeing anything else. They're not going to any other thread. They're just seeing what is the next task. I want to do the next. I want to do next. I want to do next. And essentially, if you have 10 things to read, you essentially cover all 10. So from a conceptual design perspective, they did a lot of research to understand how people perceive, because their goal was very clear. Can we essentially declutter the email inbox like completely? Their goal is inbox zero. Inbox zero basically means a point where you essentially see zero unread mails in your inbox. और ये मेरे साथ भी कभी नहीं हुआ. I'm sure nobody in the group who is actually studying there, they might have an inbox zero. And that is the reason they built a great product. They spent considerable time on conceptual design. And they said, then the second part is information design. How do we effectively build conceptual design? वो हम discuss करेंगे. We will discuss all of those things. How do you figure that out? There's a process. But what is conceptual design? ये बात सबको clear है. Conceptual design is the first segue to understand how a consumer might perceive a solution to work. That what is the image of the solution when you essentially want to present it to the consumer, that is formed in their head based on their intrinsic motivations or whatever and whatnot, right? That is why conceptual design is really important to understand how the consumer is actually perceiving it. सो संयम है भैया, फिर जैसे स्विगी वगैरह में मैप्स शो होता है फॉर डिलीवरी गाय, जेप्टो नहीं शो करता, देन इट्स अ कॉन्सेप्ट. ओके, सो इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग. सो व्हाई डजंट जेप्टो डू इट? बिकॉज the point is, for Zepto, their promise is that we'll deliver it in 10 minutes. Why do you even care then? Why do you really want to see a map if it gets delivered in 10 minutes? Because their value prop is different, right? From a conceptual design perspective, if I say that something is getting delivered to you in 10 minutes, you would not care where it's coming from, right? You would say that 10 minutes to hai. But if I make this 10 minutes to 1 hour, at that point of time you would want to see, yaar 1 ghanta hai yaar, to mujhe dekhna hai ki where is the person, why is the person stuck there, because it's taking time, it's a longer time. But if it's like 10 minutes, why would you care? I'm being very honest about it, right? Agar main aaj ki date mein Sayam, if I tell you that I'm going to teach you how to crack a product interview in 10 minutes versus I am going to take 16 hours, right? Where would you plan your structure better? I'm asking a simple question. There's a solution which helps you crack product management interviews in 10 minutes, and there's a solution which helps you crack in 16 hours, right? In 16 hours, you might have to figure out your structure, how are you available, are you not available, all of those things, right? But if in 10 minutes, would you even care? Do you even want to see it from a conceptual design perspective, that how the structure of the course would be and stuff like that, right? It doesn't matter, right? Understood. So that is conceptual design. The next part is information design. Information design essentially means on your application, right? How do you structure information so that it becomes consumable for the end user in the easiest possible way, right? What I mean by that is the same example that I gave you, Make My Trip, the same example that which I gave you across for Make My Trip. Why do you essentially see that Make My Trip or any website has the first thing in information architecture as from to? Why can't it be something else? So information design basically means what relevant information would you show on the face of the product so that the final value from an information structure perspective becomes easier to discover, right? Again, I'll put it across. Go to Amazon.com. You see why search on top of it? Because that is how information design is. That people essentially come with an intent of searching something. And they essentially go there and they search it across. Agar unne search hi gayab kar di hoti, and if there was no search on Amazon, don't you think the discovery of things would have been very less? Right? If there was no search on Amazon.com, would you have been able to discover the products that you essentially wanted? Absolutely. You would have not been able to. So that's why information design is critical, right? From a product designer as well as a product manager perspective. Then what is interaction design? Can somebody tell me what is interaction design? How many of you have heard this line? Paytm पे 30 रुपए प्राप्त हुए. रोज सुनते हो ना? बहुत बढ़िया, बहुत बढ़िया. This is a classic example of interaction design. The intent of that particular interaction design basically means when a consumer interacts with the product, right? What kind of experience the consumer has in order to understand that the value is delivered through that interaction. What I mean by that is like, so tell me the honest reason, what does this line Paytm pe X rupees prapt hue communicate to the end user? Does it communicate what is the amount of money? Is that the true intent? Ask yourself. Is that the true intent to tell that there is X amount transferred, or the intent is that a transaction has been done successfully? What is the true intent? Is the intent to communicate it to the end user that 300 rupees have been transferred to your account, or the intent is to tell him that the transaction which had started is now completed? end users, the shopkeeper would not even care. They would not even remember ki previous amount kya tha, because there are so many transactions happening, right? But what is delightful for them is that whenever they hear this thing, they essentially mean, okay, transaction ho gayi. Yes. So this again, how many of you have seen this Apple ringtone? वो जो Apple की ringtone होती है, how many of you must have seen that, right? So even if a group of 50 people, if that ringtone comes across from Apple, you would essentially understand that, oh, somebody has an iPhone. Basically, interaction design is the layer when you interact with the product. It gives you a sense of value confirmation of the action that you essentially want to take. That if the product layer is telling that my value is that a transaction should be done, how does the interaction effectively tell it to the end user that the actual this value has been done or not? Make sense? Yahan tak sab mere sath aligned hai? Is everybody aligned with me? What is interaction design? We will do a question on it, yaar. Hum karenge. Aaj main bana nahi paya. Unfortunately, I was very busy last week. I have not been able to come up with a more simpler framework for you guys to effectively across. But yahan tak clarity hai. ठीक है. अब विजुअल डिजाइन तो तुम्हें पता है, उसमें तो तुम महाराज हो. एवरीबॉडी इन योर की यूआई तो तुम सबको आता है, तो मैं विजुअल डिजाइन एक्सप्लेन नहीं करूंगा. बट यू शुड डेफिनेटली लर्न द प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ यूआई डिजाइन. ठीक है, यू शुड लर्न दैट. We will talk about that also. It can have color theory, what colors are good. It can be about spacing of buttons. It can be a bunch of things, ABCD, whatever. Not really worried about that. So these are the 4 layers of product design that essentially a product manager or a product designer has to consistently think about in order to deliver that value. A product sense question is primarily at a product thinking level, that okay, what can be the solution? How do I prioritize that solution? A product design question is that now you essentially know that this is the product layer. How do I effectively translate it into a solution? Right? Looking at these 4 principles, which is conceptual, information, interaction, and visual design, and effectively build a product layer which can essentially communicate the value that my product sense problem has figured out to the end user more effectively. Baat samajh mein aayi? So a product design problem is about how do you effectively translate your product layer solution using the principles of product design, which is conceptual design, information design, interaction design, and visual design, to come up with a design layer which communicates the value of the product in the least possible effort. ठीक है, इसको मैं थोड़ा सा वैसे भी कर लेता हूं. लेट मी जस्ट रैप दिस अक्रॉस. ये बात सबको क्लियर है? ये दिख रहा है एवरीबॉडी, राइट? देयर आर स्टेप्स like wireframing and stuff like that. We'll talk about that, all of those things, right? But is this clear to you guys? What I just want to tell you across is that this is also something that, but not everything is like a product design problem, right? What are not product design problems? Like if somebody tells you how to make a landing page or how to make a edtech app or how to make an app like Swiggy, do you really think it's a product design problem? Like if I tell you design and better experience of Swiggy's order booking flow, do you really think it's a product design problem? The reason it's not a product design problem is because of the very same fact that the mental models or the conceptual design of an order booking flow is already prefixed. It's already prefixed, right? So when there is not enough discovery from a consumer or a conceptual design perspective, right, then you're essentially building the UI. Practically. Yep. You're practically building a new UI for them with some changes, with some button flow or something like that, some changes in interaction design. But truly, it's not a product design problem. Product design problem is when you have an ambiguous product and solution. And then you say, I will build some, and then you will learn product design. Okay, how do I think about conceptual design? But If something is already pre-built by thousands of engineers, right, their collaborative effort is anyway going to make. So whenever these designers come to me and they say we have redesigned the Netflix experience, I say, dude, does it even make sense to even do that? Right? Does it even make sense to do that? Right? You might bring up improvements and stuff like that and whatever and whatnot. Right? That is all fine. Agreed. But on a practical basis, it's not a problem that you should solve for to learning product design. That's product improvement, or if you want to do something. Exactly. Nikhil is right. That is something like you want to do make a product improvement, you can definitely do that, right? But there are hundreds of engineers which have already come up with a thought process that this might be the, and it is used by millions of users, right? So you cannot make fundamental changes to the conceptual design layer, right? Ideally try to do those problems. Like, I'll give you a product design problem. How do you design a bathroom for blind people? Assume you are a PM for DLF. Okay? DLF, that basically the real estate company. You are told that there is a large market based out of India for blind people using bathrooms. Currently, the problem is they are effectively in need of someone else to guide them, which leads to no confidence building, making them believe they are impaired, and embarrassment. So you are told design a bathroom for blind people so that they can effectively use the bathroom on their own. Now there are two constraints. Don't come up with outlandish solutions such as I will build a moving chair and using AI it will figure out. If you do shit like that, then most people would not even be able to buy this across. Make a viable bathroom for blind people. I want you to start from what are the problems, right? I'll just quickly turn this into this so that you can effectively read it. I'll just quickly make it slightly bigger. Okay? So this is the problem. Take a screenshot, guys. Take a screenshot. So this is something that we will do, right? And you effectively have to come up with this. So guys, I'll stop here. Thank you very much for giving your time. Please like the video. Please share your comments. Please do LinkedIn posts as much as possible by telling what you learned from the session. And next week, be ready. We will solve a problem together. And I also want you guys to come up with what topics should I cover, right? It also helps me learn also, right? So I want you guys to come give me feedback honestly, and we will then close it across. Thank you very much.